Acolytes. Today, well, one of my freaking, well, not favorite YouTubers, but I mean, for F's sake, this guy actually made pretty good stuff by now, so not gonna lie here. Engagement better to stochastic terrorist pipeline. Now, if you don't know who he means, you will. Because after actually judging by the thumbnail, let's see. Yeah, well, exactly. Let's just start. Liberationism holds that the only proper role of violence is to defend persons and property against violence. That any issue of violence that goes beyond such just defense is self-aggressive, unjust, and criminal. Huh. Actually quite agree with that. I mean, the self-defense thing, I think most people would agree with it. Murray and Roto.
Hey, internets. The time has come to examine political violence and the rhetoric that leads up to it. Because there is a very unfortunate pattern in some very bad political discourse and some very stupid takes that we have been witnessing in the last 10 years or so. Which is that there's a lot of people out there, both social media influencers as they're sometimes called, and corporate statist media journos, who just kind of appear to have no sense of responsibility for the wide audiences that they...
Why should they? They never had to hold consequences, so it is what it is.
Reach. And thus they see nothing wrong with using rhetoric that is effectively a call to violence, or as it's sometimes called, engaging in just obvious stochastic terrorism, where someone indirectly incites violence against another person or a specific group of people, or just whatever, often using rhetoric that is dehumanizing, demonizing, inflammatory, and just in general designed to rile up people's emotions, in a way that can very easily lead an emotionally unstable person to try and commit a very serious aggressive crime in real life, which can range from assault to attempted murder, or to things like swatting, where someone tricks the police into doing a raid on a person's house, in a way that can very easily lead to that person's loss of life, such as by lying to the police and claiming that a person at their house is holding somebody hostage at gunpoint or something like that. And
the thing is, this can go awry so quickly. Or how many times did they just kill pets off or some oft pets? It's just, why would you do that? This should be an instant criminal case for 5 years. Really, if somebody plays with someone's life to this degree, then just get them out of here. I mean, I play with Unlived, something totally different afterwards. So don't compare that, but for F's sake, Acolytes.
as I get close to 100,000 subscribers and notice how many views my own videos are getting, I'm realizing more and more just how important it is to not act like a completely deranged man-child. And just how unfortunate it is that so many journos and other influencers don't really seem to share my perspective on this.
I am actually, I don't know who this is. Destiny, yes, I know who he is, and fair enough. Asmongold was at that point very, very unhinged. This was the time where I actually stopped watching him, so I understand why he is here. Right now, fair enough, but at one point, definitively yes.
However, this video is not just going to be me calling out various buffoons for abusing their platform. Rather, I'd like to examine this topic seriously and offer some real solutions, some of which social media owners should probably take note of, others those of us who have a platform should take note of and adopt a better standard of ethics, but there's also just some basic solutions that everybody can help with in regards to just kind of helping you tone down the heat of the rhetoric and finding some more mature solutions that actually make sense. Because I've seen a few people call out and talk about this subject, but the solutions they offer aren't really anything other than be better. And that's really not all we can do. There's actually some pretty straightforward, simple solutions that for some reason have gone largely unmentioned and unnoticed. But before I really get into things, this video has a very relevant to the subject sponsor. Unfortunately, a lot of what our mainstream statist media has to say tends to be more focused on pushing deceptive narratives than an honest reporting of reality. And so I'm proud to be partnered with Ground News for this video. Now, Ground News is more than just another news source. It's a brilliantly...
The thing is, I already talked about Ground News. Ground News is in the middle of the thing. from what I've seen, it's really really good. So I'm not gonna say that it's something you shouldn't look in, but also if you can definitively you can take the thing and inform yourself relatively good. So there's that. But at the end of the day, I mean, yeah, you have to decide it for yourself. I'm just gonna let
It also
it
shows
run.
us coverage details and a bias distribution chart, which shows how many sources are reporting
Yeah.
on the issue, which sources
I
they
mean, it's
are,
fine.
and also where those sources tend to lie on the political spectrum. In this case, it lets us quickly see that this issue is mostly only being reported by the right, which kind of makes sense actually, because this particular story makes pro-choicers look bad. You can also click on any of the sources to be taken directly to the article, or you can view quick summaries of each article by clicking around this area. This allows you to understand what's going on a lot faster than trying to trudge through all these journos manually. It's why I actually use Ground News to help with the research for a lot of my videos. There's also Blind Spot, a feature that specifically shows which stories are being over and underreported by different political factions in a way that lets you flip through and quickly understand them. Also, Ground News still remains independent and subscriber funded, so to gain access to these features, go to ground.news/MentisWave or scan my QR code to get 40% off the Vantage plan, which
Fair
grants you
enough.
unlimited access. But anyways, to really understand what exactly I mean by rhetoric that kind of counts as a call to violence, let's just start with a very simple, run-of-the-mill example from Destiny.
Like, the problem is that people like Asmongold will never admit it, but Asmongold has already said things that I think would entitle him to a full-on fucking ass whipping if certain people saw him in public. Like, if I had family members that were being deported and this guy's out here saying like, oh, I think they should want to be fucking epic, or family members that worked for USAID or any of these government institutions, and Asmongold is sitting here like laughing with his teeth falling out, making, you know, $1 million a month about how epic it is that they're all getting fired and shit. Like, he's already so far beyond.
I'm gonna be honest, no matter what he says about this, I think it's just generally a good thing that we actually sort out the, well, not useful out of our ranks. So, and by the way, Destiny is somebody who, well, he's unhinged, especially with, well, gifting around some videos with naked people that he shouldn't have done without consent, by the way. So yeah, that's that. Always get the context, who speaks to you about what. Always.
Now, in terms of refutation, which is what I usually do when I show a clip of a Bedtoid, there's not much here other than the fact that the private sector tends to create more jobs than the public sector, and thus whining about Doge taking away jobs from US aid isn't really a good argument because more jobs would have been created had that money been left in the private sector anyway. But that's an easy refutation. The real problem, of course, is the fact that he's abusing his platform to say that Asmongold should get a street meeting, and that's just kinda obviously not okay. Any rational, mature person understands why that's not okay. I really shouldn't have to explain it. I think there's certain things where if you have to explain it to someone, then it's a waste of time because the fact that they don't automatically understand it is proof that they are not capable of understanding it, no matter how it is explained to them. And of course, the real problem here is that it's actually much worse. Because whether or not Destiny himself is just talking smack, and whether or not he himself would assault Asmongold in public is obviously irrelevant. The real problem here is, of course, that Destiny's videos get hundreds of thousands of views. And therefore, it really only takes one emotionally unstable person hearing this to have a problem. Because obviously most people watching this are not going to unironically think that they now have a moral imperative to hunt down Asmongold and give him a street meeting. In fact, that number is probably near zero. But then you also have to ask the question, just because it's near zero, does that mean it actually is zero? Because the thing is, most people, when we watch somebody on the news, watching some pundits talk to each other, or what you're doing right now, watching somebody on YouTube for their political takes, I mean, you probably don't believe every single word we say. And you probably don't take everything we say serious. And that's a good thing. You shouldn't take everything we say seriously. Because a lot of it is just banter. It's not even really meant to be taken seriously. In fact, a lot of it is just blood sports. You're just looking for something to be entertained by. However, the issue is there are a few people out there, a very small number, but there is that one guy who really does take everything he hears seriously. And this is something I've been again starting to think about.
And by the way, it's always a bit... It's pathetic. I always try to go with people into good faith, or that people actually argue in good faith. Nothing different. If they prove me otherwise, well, then I'm on a freaking turning them into zombie. No, getting their souls free. Let's say it like that, acolytes, because. So there's that, but he is correct about it for the most part. I cannot disagree with anything by now. Logical. That's good.
As I get near to 100k subscribers, when you have an audience, you kind of have to respect that audience and take a little bit more responsibility for what you're saying. And since I've been thinking about this lately, I find it really bizarre and really sickening, really, that there are people out there with audiences 10 times, 100 times bigger than mine who aren't thinking about this at all, apparently. The subject just kind of somehow slips their mind. And the sad part is that's actually the good faith interpretation. The other possible interpretation of this is that they know exactly what they're doing. For example, in this case, maybe Destiny really does want somebody in his audience to assault Asmongold. That's obviously much, much, much worse. And that's what makes this such an important topic. That even the good faith interpretation of this is still very much a big yikers. They're either fully aware that what they're doing is inciting violence, or they're just being completely immature and irresponsible and completely lacking any sense of self-awareness around the fact that, hey, you kind of have an audience where you kind of tend to get hundreds of thousands of views. You know, maybe you should be aware of this fact and be a little less cringe. And of course, this isn't just a Destiny problem. I mean, we've seen this from a lot of other political content creators, like Voosh, for example.
As a Canadian, it kind of baffles me how people can say over and over that things will just be fine when things are clearly not just fine being like 2 months in. It just feels complacent. Yeah, like, we need to get militant and fast, okay? They're going to start, like, disappearing U.S. citizens. There are going to be bodies, like, washing up on the shore. They're going to build the camps. They're going to try to do everything they can. The whole thing is like a loot and burn experiment.
Yeah, pretty much self-explanatory. Again, even the good faith interpretation of this is that they just have no filter, no awareness, no respect for their audience. And this particular clip also kind of shows a really basic example of how stochastic terrorism tends to come with a bit of spice of fear-mongering behind it. We need to get militant because the other side is going to attack us and do bad things and disappear us in the streets, when in reality that's probably not going to happen. So it just gets people riled up for nothing. And unfortunately, like I said earlier, I don't think there's really anything you can do to change certain people. Someone past a certain age who still behaves this way is probably going to be like that forever. Some people,
do I agree with that? Probably not. The thing is, you can change people in any age bracket. The question is always if it's worth it, if they want to or not. Because at the end of the day, I think it's always worth a try of actually trying to discuss something and not just saying pauschal, hey, it doesn't matter if it's at this age, he will always be that way. If that person proves to you that yes, he will not change after talking, then yes, good, perfectly fine. I agree. But sometimes it just takes a small word or a certain thing to actually change a mind. In those cases, though, that he just presented, I don't even think that those people that presented this way, like those people that he talks about, that they even believe the things they are saying, but that they are entertainers and they do this to entertain. I'm not excusing anything, by the way. But at the end of the day, this stuff will just happen. It will. And if you get proven that somebody just cannot change, just drop it. It's fine. Then it's fine. If you have other people that say, hey, he's always like this, he's always been like this, drop it. Okay, fine. I understand it. But there is... But it's always the question if somebody came with logic to their point or with pure, unbridled feelings. Oh, my English is just isn't good enough to actually explain what I mean properly. I think. Acolytes, just tell me if you understood this. I'm not sure.
times manage to learn this kind of thing and this kind of behavior past the age of 30 or so, but it's not usual. However, what we can do is try and at least fix the behavior to tone it down a bit. You probably won't get them to change internally, but there is a simple thing that the community needs to do to kind of tone this type of rhetoric down. And that is more people who are fans of that creator need to call them out on it. See, it's very easy for me, a right-leaning, me-cishopian libertarian, to kind of call these trash libs out on their BS. I know that a lot of people who watch my content are the types of people who are already fully aware that breadtubers in general are grifters and not even half as intelligent as they want people to believe they are. And so in many ways, this is just expected, ridiculous, immature behavior from them that confirms this to be true. However, there's probably at least a few people out there watching this who are fans of Destiny, who are fans of Voosh. And what you need to realize is that you need to kind of hold your guy accountable. And I mean this for myself too.
And by the way, he is correct. By himself, his fans, they have to hold him accountable, as I wish the same of you, acolytes. Do not hold back. Either I agree with you or disagree with you, but... And don't be insulting. If you're insulting, you're instantly banned. That's insulting, toxic, threatening, don't care. You're instantly banned. Keep it... I mean, you can insert a dig or two in it. That's not bad. But don't insult. Just make it smart.
If I ever slip up and say something a little yikesy, I want the people who actually care about my content letting me know that. And so this is my message to any Destiny or Voosh fan who happened to click on this video because, hey, it's kind of including Destiny and Voosh. Y'all need to start holding your boy to a higher standard of ethics. A big reason...
Oh, and if you don't know who Vosh is, or Voosh, or Vosh, this guy is a... I wouldn't say he is officially PDO-file, but he himself argued that lolicon content is PDF filey, and he himself watches it, and also he wants to have a horse genital. No, sorry about that. He wants to be a horse. And he still wants to make stuff with those characters, so... And if you've seen the things, yeah, those are specifically those lolly characters that I personally disagree with. Not the ones that look all grown up. I don't care about that. I mean the ones that where my fans disagree with me on. Let's just say it like that, acolytes.
And why so many content creators do insane things, like inciting violence, is because they just kind of get away with it. They often only get criticism from the outside. But I think on the internet, within various communities surrounding various people, or surrounding various influencers as they're called, even though I absolutely hate that word, you kind of have to hold people accountable from within. And because you don't do that, what ends up happening is that the stupid behavior continues. There's no punishment, there's no pushback, nothing. Especially when one of these ways to hold them accountable is actually very easy to do, and that's just to simply stop watching them for a bit, which might not sound like anything, but it actually kinda is. You see, the way big tech algorithms work is that they tend to work on engagement, and unfortunately, big tech algorithms don't really know the difference between negative and positive engagement. And so what happens is that clout goblins, people who are seeking attention, seeking engagement, people who are trying to get their posts thousands upon thousands of views, or someone who's already an established influencer, again, I hate that word, just trying to maintain the views that they normally get. There's a very perverted incentive out there right now in the way these algorithms operate, the kind of engagement farm by intentionally saying stupid things, intentionally posting rage bait, intentionally saying crazy stuff, because the way things currently work, they'll get views over it. And this is something that's very important for everybody to understand, because
a lot of people excuse the degenerate outbreaks like this in Destiny's community because they think Destiny is fighting for a greater good. That's subservience any form of accountability or decency. I agree with this.
Because if you find yourself getting recommended crappy things by the algorithm, that actually may simply be because you're interacting with crappy things too much. And so what happens is when you watch an immature man-child say something stupid, and you comment on them and call out why what they're saying is stupid, the algorithm doesn't really see much of a difference between that and you giving another video the thumbs up and commenting on them and saying why you liked what they said. And so you'll get recommended more of the garbage content that you didn't like. And this is actually another reason why calling out this kind of behavior from the outside doesn't really work. Because the algorithm sees that.
For F's sake, sorry, I am distracted with the Guild Wars 2 thing. I don't remember because I played it for a long time, specifically PvP.
And saying why
But
you liked what.
as you can see here, he's clopping on the down guy. You don't need that. This guy will die anyway if you just... You can see that there are enough people just go out, look for the next freaking point just to win. Although he already won, so fuck it. Yeah, sorry about that. But and yes, I liked Guild Wars 2.
Content that you didn't like. And this is actually another reason why calling out this kind of behavior from the outside doesn't really work. Because the algorithm sees that, doesn't know the difference, and then starts recommending you more BreadTube schlop. Because
And by the way, yes, I agree with that.
you watched and responded to some other BreadTube schlop. And yes, I actually do ruin the algorithm for myself when watching and refuting BreadTubers. In many ways, I watch them so that you don't have to. So yeah, my recommended feed is unfortunately filled to the brim with BreadToid slop. It is what it is. And so that's one thing to remember. If you see something and it's stupid, click off the video, and if you can, right-click, don't recommend content. That's what you...
Yeah, but the thing is, at the end of the day, even if you engage with the content,
should really do...
Okay, if you engage with the content, that means you want to see it. Be it like in your case that you actually want to make some video about it, or somebody who just wants to dispute it. What you can also do is engage with different content that actually is, well, a bit different. Because I do the same thing. I engage with, some gaming, funny stuff, engagement content, and also this, well, stuff like this. So it basically, so it recommends me everything in a mix. And some of those videos, by the way, I just have to admit that some of those I would never ever get if it wasn't for my acolytes. So there's that.
When you're on the outside looking in, you may be tempted to reply to them. You may be tempted to watch their whole video. But for the sake of what the algorithm recommends you in the future, you really shouldn't. And again, it's a way to hold people accountable for saying absurd things.
Still, I just have to disagree with him on this one. Even if I want to dispute somebody, I have to see the thing at some point. It's not... especially for a commentary, or if I'm interested in something and I want to know the truth, I just have to see it. So there is a two sides of one coin. Fair enough.
Because as long as it gives them clout, they're gonna do it. This is just kind of the unfortunate reality of how the internet works these days. There are generally two kinds of people who tend to gain a generally large following, and that's people who make content that people are genuinely interested in and genuinely enjoy, and people who rage farm the algorithm with cringe. There are of course people who are in the middle of this, people who make content that some people enjoy, but then pad their numbers a bit by also posting a bit of cringe. But generally, that's kind of how it works. You can either make it by making good content, or you can make it by making deranged content. There you go. I just demystified the algorithm for those of you who are wondering how it works. That is legitimately the TLDR. And unfortunately, it's also not just YouTube. This kind of thing also exists on places like Twitter, or again, X as it's now called. This is another thing that, going back to Destiny, he does this all the time, I've noticed. A lot of his takes on X are very obviously deliberately designed to be a little bit inflammatory. It's very obviously just virtue signaling to his audience, but at the same time saying things that are wrong in ways that will irritate the people who don't agree with him just enough so that they'll reply to him. And again, admittedly, I often reply to Breadtoids and explain why they're wrong. But again, I kind of do it so that you don't have to. It's more useful for just one person to point out why they're wrong and then ratio off that one person if you must, than having hundreds of people reply to him. Because when you do that, when you dogpile someone, you're actually just kind of helping them. A lot of times when you see people who are, again, quote-unquote influencers complaining about them being harassed, they're actually lying. They don't mind it at all. They love the dogpiling because they're getting more views. They get more followers out of it. Because of course these recommendations from the algorithm are all based on an AI algorithm that recommends based entirely on engagement. Which then brings us to kind of the second thing you can do, which is that people in general need to kind of push back on big tech for the way the algorithm currently works. And this is one of those things where one or two people doing it, it's not going to make any difference. But if enough people do it in ways that big tech starts being afraid that they might lose money if they don't finally cave in and fix it, they'll eventually have to reconsider how the algorithm currently works. So when you see things like surveys asking you about how you feel about the algorithm coming from any of these big tech companies, you actually should let them know that you don't like negative engagement. And the thing is, people have actually been doing this, and it is kind of starting to work. We've even gotten it to the point where we've actually even got people like Elon Musk commenting on it and at least acknowledging that the problem exists. So you kind of need to make your voice heard and let big tech know that negative engagement isn't actually something we want. And the thing is, this particular subject, the subject of cringe lords who advocate for political violence, is actually a really particularly good subject to help put some pressure and weight on that. Because another big problem with the algorithm is specifically in regards to big tech censorship. The way censorship currently works in a lot of big tech sites is that they censor and shadow ban based on how politically correct your opinions are, aka how much you agree with the establishment. And this is actually partially responsible for how RedTube managed to gain a foothold. It's how a lot of these guys became popular. Because the main difference with the BreadTuber is that they generally tend to have, well, correct opinions. And so they, whether intentionally or not, kind of jumped into an algorithmic blind spot. Because while saying very deranged things and farming negative engagement while also holding correct opinions, well, guess what? That's a huge algorithm boost. This is why you might notice that people who have an audience and don't have correct opinions, they tend to have a higher standard of behavior and a higher standard of maturity. And it's not so much that that kind of behavior gives them an algorithmic boost. It's more like they'll just get shadow banned if they don't, while on the other hand, breadtoids can say whatever crazy, aggressive things they want and still get millions of impressions. However,
I agree with that, yes. And I think we had more than enough, well, over the years, more than enough things to prove it.
fortunately, recently this seems to be changing, because people are already kind of complaining about this. But there's still, unfortunately, a lot of work.
Now, the thing is, it changes because most people are actually going to the other side. The other side right now, the pendulum just swings differently right now, and companies just want to, of course, cater to those people. And now it is what it is. You just go in, have a different opinion than it was, and now this is fine. Now BreadTube is getting shafted step by step. Fair enough.
To do. The algorithms in big tech, unfortunately, still kind of work like this. They've gotten better, they've gotten tweaked a little bit since 2017 to just a couple years ago, but it's still very much not good. A lot of people have kind of gotten complacent about this. A lot of people are thinking, oh hey, Elon Musk owns...
You know what? I was wrong about him. This is freaking awesome PvP play. He's fucking a god here.
Now, and he exposed the algorithms for being cringe and rigged. Everything's good now. No, unfortunately, that is just not true. The algorithm still sucks. It still very much rewards people for being a bully while wearing the mask of political correctness. And you can tell this because the people who act aggressive and behave like this still have massive audiences. Which is annoying and unfortunate, because the way shadow banning should work in an ideal and more just society is that shadow banning should be used, instead of a way of censorship, should be used against people who try to abuse the algorithm and try to farm negative engagement. It shouldn't be a thing, but unfortunately it is, and it still is. And we can see evidence of this just by looking at recent happenings. For instance, Hasanabi got banned from Twitch for 3 days. And you might first hear that and think that, okay, great, Twitch is finally holding some of their big streamers accountable. But of course, if you know Hasanabi and you know the kind of rhetoric that he tends to have, you know that that's actually just a massive slap on the wrist. Hasanabi has been outright, flat out supporting Hamas terrorists for quite some time now. And so a 3-day suspension is really nothing. And this is, of course, because Hasanabi's opinions are...
And by the way, this isn't a question, this isn't anything that he just put out of his butthole. You can look it up at any time how he supports this kind of people. This just isn't an opinion, it's just pure fact.
...are very much within the political correct sphere. The kind of socialist light, breadtube schlop, trash lib opinions that tend to make our decadent elites clap and gurgle and hork. And so you can see that they still get away with it. I mean, let's just be honest for a moment. If a right-wing content creator out there said anything even remotely close to 1% as anti-Semitic as Hamasabi has said, heck, probably even 0.1%, we all know that they would get their channel yeeted into the sun. The moderators of big tech would shadow ban and demonetize that content so hard that it would never organically be seen again. But again, because Hasnabi has correct trademark opinions trademark, he's allowed to be deranged and only get a slap on the wrist. Thus proving that, yes, the algorithm still sucks. And so we see that being aggressively PC is still very much a way to get a free pass in the world of social media today. And one of the things we can kind of also see from this is that, well, a lot of journos behave this way too. See, unfortunately, violent rhetoric we see from breadtoids is really just coming from the top down. Because unfortunately, a lot of corporate status journos do the same thing. They tend to be a little bit smarter about it than breadtoids. I mean, after all, they're hired generally entirely based on their ability to spin things and say certain things without outright saying it. In fact, journos can often be very sly and crafty in how they do this. For example, look at this New York Times article right here. Can voters be held accountable for their candidates' behavior? Or shouldn't Trump voters be viewed as traitors depending on when you're looking at it in the Internet Archive?
Can the voters be held accountable? Well, they have to suffer under it, so not sure. I don't think so, because you could just have a candidate that lied so effectively that you just pick him and then it turns out, it's not.
Now, the article itself eventually concludes that no, you can't really hold voters accountable for the behavior of those who they voted for. Which of course makes sense, because one of the basic flaws of democracy is that candidates don't actually have to do what they were voted in office to do. They can go in a completely different direction once they're in office. And of course, everybody who's well informed on candidates knows that democracy really is often just choosing who's the lesser evil. Voting for a candidate doesn't automatically mean you agree with everything that candidate says that they're going to do. And that's kind of the problem here. It's a stupid question that doesn't even need to be asked. So why are they entertaining it? Well, because engagement farming. You see, it's not actually obvious that they're against this kind of thinking until halfway through the article. And so it's entirely clickbait. A more responsible and more honest way of titling this article would be, why voters should not be held accountable for their candidates' behavior, instead of this clickbaity headline and clip art that suggests the opposite. But of course, journos have to chase that clickbait. And plus, they know that a lot of people don't actually read articles. A lot of people just...
The sad fact is, if you don't clickbait, you lose. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it, and they're gonna find them earlier than you.
Read headlines and then infer based on those headlines. The result of this is that a lot of people will walk away from this article thinking that political violence is still okay. Typical journo behavior. But on the other hand, sometimes journos are a little bit more obvious about things, although still in ways that are very manipulative. A big one I recall being that assassination plot against Brett Kavanaugh, which just kind of shows the seriousness of the issue. Again, all it takes is one deranged person. If you're feeding nonsense to millions of people, eventually it's going to be a problem. And there's really no way you can't know that. Now, for those of you who forgot, since the story was largely buried, Kavanaugh was a court pick who was largely the subject of a pretty big, stereotypical witch hunt. I very distinctly remember the whole Christine Blasey Ford scenario, where he was randomly accused of sexual assault just as he's about to be confirmed to the Supreme Court. And the problem with this is that the media treated the case like it was completely true without any evidence whatsoever, and just fed fear-mongering article after fear-mongering article that some wicked, evil, bad, evil, straight white male is about to be on the court. That was the NPC talking point in the day. Kavanaugh bad. And the issue, of course, is that the case was a load of BS. No, seriously, I've actually considered making a video on the Christine Blasey Ford accusations. I consider myself fairly good at knowing when someone's full of it, and one thing that just about no pundit was willing to say was that Ford was probably lying. Her accusations specifically only included information that could not be falsified. No date range, because if she gave a date range, then it could have been falsified by pointing out that he was somewhere else at the time. No real location, because then it could be falsified by proving that he was never there. No specific details whatsoever. If you wanted to deliberately craft a bogus case that was deliberately designed to waste people's time, the Ford case is exactly what you would want to make. Mainly because sexual assault is one of those things that people automatically kind of have an emotional attachment to. It immediately gets people's gears grinding. And as a result, people kind of turn their brain off when they hear it, which makes the perfect go-to bogus accusation for when you want to smear somebody and get the public on your side. Because ordinarily, any other crime that has no time, no place, zero information other than who's being accused, everyone would consider that bogus. For instance, if your local mayor got accused by someone of stealing something, and that person couldn't say what was stolen, how it was stolen, when it was stolen, where it was stolen, the accusation was just, yeah, Mayor X stole something from me. No, I don't remember any other details. Then absolutely no rational person would be taking that seriously.
Fair enough,
Now,
yeah.
sexual assault is a very serious, very horrible crime. It's one of the worst things you can do to a person. But people really need to stop turning their brain off when it comes to this one specific crime. Because I've noticed that people afford a completely ridiculously low standard of evidence when it comes to
Yeah, the thing is, you shouldn't ever have a low standard of evidence on stuff. It's just try to keep it up. Simple as that.
And as a result of that, whenever the elites have someone that they don't like and they want to smear, for whatever reason, it's always the go-to false accusation, because they know that it's a specific type of accusation that is known to emotionally manipulate the masses into immediately assuming a guilty until proven innocent mindset, while completely ignoring the fact that the details of the accusation are completely and utterly patently absurd. And of course, it's a perfect avenue for stochastic terrorism from our mainstream corporate statist media. Because if you remember the Kavanaugh case and the rhetoric surrounding it, you may also remember that all the partisan hack journos came out of the closet to publish hit piece after hit piece after hit piece, all asserting that Kavanaugh was definitely guilty, despite the fact, again, that they had absolutely no evidence whatsoever. And that is absolutely a form of stochastic terrorism. Sure, most of these articles didn't actually suggest that anybody should give Kavanaugh some street justice, but the sheer magnitude of hack journos conspiring to publish all of these hit pieces from various platforms gives a false implication that a very guilty person is being unjustly sworn into the Supreme Court, and of course it came with the fear-mongering that Kavanaugh was going to take all of the women's rights away, thus painting Kavanaugh as if he's some kind of Marvel supervillain. And that is not responsible journalism. That is the kind of stupid rhetoric that will lead an emotionally unstable person to try and carry out some form of assassination plot. And it's unfortunate, because this kind of crap leads to political violence all the time, like the Donald Trump assassination attempts. Both cases involved an emotionally unstable person being radicalized by nonsensical rhetoric. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize. The reason why our mainstream statist media behaves this way is actually very similar to the reason why many influencers or content creators, or whatever you want to call them, also often post cringe. The reason of engagement bait. Trying to get people's attention with emotionally charged nonsense is not a new grift at all. It's just an old grift that has been adapted to the current technology. Get people riled up so that they'll give you attention. And that's what we're really seeing here, is this engagement farmer to stochastic terrorist pipeline of sorts. It's really just the logical conclusion of how things currently work. Because we don't really have any good standards of behavior or ethics, being an aggressive demagogue is thus an effective strategy to gain relevance. It's a strategy of riling people up, rallying the crowd, and getting them to look at you,
yes.
thus farming ad revenue and gaining subscribers, etc., etc. Whether it's an online influencer or a journal publication, the issue here is the same. Which then just immediately brings up the question, what the heck can we actually do about this? Well, aside from you just personally not giving them attention and not giving your engagement like I recommended earlier, there's some other things we can do. The first of these is realizing that we aren't delegitimizing bad journos enough. A lot of us think that we are, but we're not. There really isn't enough of an intellectual delegitimization force on the internet these days. Not enough to counter the amount of BS that's out there. In fact, this is a big reason why I started my channel in the first place. There's just so many bad narratives that are designed to either distract people or take advantage of people's emotions, steering people to think and behave in ways that are based on things that are not true. Because the complete lack of ethical standards in both journalism and content creation results in the problem of everyone doing it. And at least in my case, I realized I can't really just sit around and hope for somebody to do something about it. Because while there's
Fair enough. Understandable.
some of us calling them out for their dishonesty and calling them out for how dangerous their rhetoric really gets, the reality is it's still not enough. The disdain I see for the lack of ethics in content creation these days is really only maybe 1% of what it really should be. Because what we really need to see is a formation of intellectual think tanks that are specifically designed and built from the ground up on the principle of delegitimizing this type of rhetoric as their main goal. Because the amount of influencers and journalist publications out there that have abused their platform and abused their credibility is still just insanely high. And of course, if you go to places like Wikipedia, you'll see that a lot of these outlets still are treated as reliable.
The thing is, it works. It clearly worked. So, I don't agree with it, but I understand why.
Sources, which is ridiculous because they're absolutely not reliable at all. And then another solution that a lot of people don't really think about is being more supportive of things like school choice, and specifically taking a stand against the way our education system.
Oh, school choice, yes. This is actually something that I had the displeasure of actually going in. It's just, yeah, you're in this district, yeah, you're going to this school, that's fine enough, even though there are way too many children for the specific child to actually get anything. It's yeah, one classroom. No, how many? We had a specific situation where it was 6 classrooms in the same year with 2 teachers. Yeah, imagine how this works.
Currently works. Because this problem really, admittedly, is a much deeper, much difficult to fix foundational problem. At its core, the problem is that people aren't taught to think for themselves as they're growing up. State public education in pretty much all of the modern world still very much follows the Perusian model of education, which is not actually designed to be an education system at all. It's designed to be a brainwashing system. It's designed to raise people to be obedient to schedules and to not think for themselves. And so, of course, it's only natural that most people grow up having no idea how to avoid being brainwashed. And so it's only natural that a huge number of people are just kind of okay with the fact that high engagement content is also often content that is designed to emotionally manipulate them. It's almost like Western society kind of has Stockholm syndrome in a way, where the average pleb has been brainwashed so hard and their mind has been fried by the algorithm so hard that they've actually grown to love being brainwashed. Which is kind of funny, but at the same time, it's also kind of disturbing when you realize just how insanely massive this problem is. And unfortunately, it's not really going to get better until people start moving away from the system. And before that can happen, of course, people need to be aware of the problem. But as for what you can do as an individual just to help yourself out right now, well, first off, just right away, you can stop watching deranged man-children who spew violent rhetoric. That will at least reduce the chances of you seeing it further in your recommended feed. And also, if you know that you're a relatively intelligent individual, consider contributing to the delegitimization strategy I mentioned earlier. And lastly, people just need to be aware of the fact of how easy it is for them to be emotionally manipulated, and stop giving attention to those who try to do it to you. Because the reality is, when you give them that attention, you're giving them authority. When people see an aggressive bread toy who gets hundreds of thousands of views and has hundreds of thousands of subscribers, people assume that, hey, this channel gets a lot of traction, therefore it must be trustworthy. And people need to realize that that is just 100.
I would disagree with this most of the time, or what I think is the case is, yeah, funny, entertaining, I'm gonna follow it. And I'm gonna do everything and believe everything because, fuck it, I don't want my entertainment to be tainted. That's what I think.
100% not true at all. The reality is, a lot of content creators and social media influencers, again, are just complete dunderheads. A lot of them gain an audience by simply appealing to emotions, or by appealing to midwits by parroting politically correct narratives. And of course, often with a sprinkling of the kind of deranged rhetoric that leads to political violence in the real world. It is a problem that will continue happening until we start holding people accountable to a higher standard of ethics, and more people become aware of just how easy it is for them to be manipulated. And that is all I have to say on this matter. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good algorithm stuff.
Yeah. Show this dude some love. I mean, for F's sake. I might not disagree, I might not agree with everything he says, but for F's sake, definitively. Someone who, well, tries his best, puts the time in. Freaking fantastic. As it is, acolytes, good night.